Hi, welcome yogis. I am on with Karen Nichols, my old friend from the Moving into Stillness discussion board. We've known each other for well over 15 years, I think, that we've been having conversations about yoga. Karen where are you?
I'm in Anthony, New Mexico, which is about halfway between Las Cruces, New Mexico, and El Paso, Texas.
I knew
I'm
that
right
you
on the
were
border.
in the Southwest, but I was like, where exactly is she? And we are here tonight to talk about her teaching her yoga classes on a SEVA basis. SEVA, S-E-V-A. That means that you're doing it and loving service. So all of her classes are performed on a donation basis, and then any profits that she makes goes to the charity. And Karen, can you please mention the charity? We're going to give them a shout out.
It's JARDIN de los NINOS. It's a preschool program for homeless and near homeless children in Las Cruces.
So thank you so much for coming here and sharing about your work. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I would love to know, how long have you been running on a donation basis? Have you always taught that way?
You know, when I started teaching, I'd been doing yoga for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and probably about 5, I guess. And the studio where I was taking yoga classes was losing a teacher, and they were losing my favorite time slot. So there were a little group of us that sort of got together and asked the owner, well, can we just keep practicing here? And so I looked at the owner, who was my first yoga teacher, and said, well, we could do this. Just use the time slot and continue the class. And a lady who's still a friend of mine, she's an artist and numerologist, Ruth Dreyer, pointed her finger at me and said, you could do this. And I just kind of backed up a step and said, okay. And then I sort of panicked.
Yes, it's funny because if you saw the talk with Joe Robertson last week, that was, he was of that time too, where a teacher would just kind of go, well, time for you to start teaching. And
right.
The people who romanticize that didn't get to go through the sheer terror of it.
Well, I mean, fortunately, back in those days, there was an Iyengar studio in El Paso that was doing 4 weekend workshops a year with really high-level teachers. And so I made a point of going to as many of those as I could get to. And when I first agreed to teach this class, I thought, oh my God, I went to Walden Books and I sat you heard this story at the first gathering. I sat on the floor in Walden Books because the yoga books were in the very back of the store on the bottom shelf. And I was pulling out books right and left. There'd be one that was just really fluffy and lightweight, and I'd throw that over in this pile. And there would be something that was just so dense and full of Sanskrit. I thought, no. And I pulled out Eric's book. And that's how I found Eric.
The Moving into Stillness, if you're watching this and you're not hearing, you're like, I'm not following this conversation. So what happened is that we met on a discussion board that was devoted to the teachings of yoga teacher Eric Schiffman. He's a master yoga teacher, and he's someday I'll just probably come on and just talk about Eric and who he is, and the Moving into Stillness discussion board. So it was in the early days of the internet, the wild, wild west, that many people started getting on board with discussion boards before the Facebook. And eventually our discussion board grew to be pretty much the largest and longest running discussion board related to yoga on the internet. One point we had 100 posts a day, and we had tremendous traffic. This was right before Facebook came in and sort of swallowed up a lot of that. But we were part of that community that started very small and then grew. And we have many of us from that group have met in person at these gathering events, as well as at workshops. And we've also taken many, many of Eric's classes, as many as we could get to, partly so that we could meet each other, and partly so that we could study with this really phenomenal teacher that we're so lucky to have had not only take these workshops with, but have online with us on a daily basis, sharing his knowledge.
Right. So I found Eric's book, and Yoga, the Spirit and Practice of Moving into Stillness, and it just completely resonated with what I felt yoga to be. It put into words a lot of things that just, it was just a wonderful thing. So that's how I started teaching, and I did not, I just taught the class at the studio. I was not an employee. I just had this one-time slot, and I taught that class.
And so what, did you get, like, $20 every time you taught or something like that, or you weren't paid?
No, I mean, it was a little struggling studio. It was actually a fitness studio. They had a lot of dance classes. It was mostly based on classes, as opposed to like a gym where you go in and get on some equipment and exercise. And it was one of the very few places in town you could find a yoga class back in those days. And I was very happy to support it.
So you didn't pay, you just worked for free, basically. Just
exactly. I just worked for free. I didn't pay membership after a while. And
did other people, so it was like a membership, kind of like a gym where people would pay membership and you would just...
Yeah, there was like a monthly fee, or you could pay for multiple weeks at a time, whatever. And then when that closed finally, a lady I met there had opened another yoga studio, and I just started teaching some classes at her studio under the same arrangement. And when that one closed, I met a lady who had a belly dance studio. She was a former school teacher, and she just really sort of low-cost belly dance classes. She has a troupe of dancers that do the Renaissance Fair and things like that. So that's always entertaining. You have to sweep up all of the sequins and bangles and beads off of the floor. So I started teaching there, and she was and is kind enough to allow me to pay space rent on the basis of how many people show up to class. So if nobody shows up, I'm not on the hook for anything. If it's one or two people, my space rent is based on a charge per student per class. And I put out a donation basket. People throw cash in it. I count out enough of the cash at the end of class, slide it in an envelope, and put it under the door into the main part of her shop. And we're done. There's really no business involved. I don't have to count the money, really. And most of the time I don't. I just pull out enough for her, and the rest goes in an envelope. And eventually I go turn it in at JARDIN de los NINOS has a thrift shop that supports it. So I go there, and they kind of get the benefit of my donation and then whatever I buy. So that's pretty much how I work it. The drawback is that there's really nobody to sub a class for me. So if I have to be gone, that class is canceled. And I've lost students over that, which is fine. I understand their desire to be someplace where, they can count on their class happening. Because of work, I tend to be kind of flaky during the legislative session every year. So for 30 to 60 days, starting in mid-January, I may have to bail out of town on short notice.
So what is it? Can you talk about what you do? Are you a spy?
What I do for a living? No, I'm not a spy. I work for a water and wastewater authority. It's a local governmental entity. I started back in about 1970 working for a small community water system. And in 2009, there were 5 of these small systems that had gotten together, and we got legislation passed in the state legislature to create the entity that I work for now. And then 3 more small systems came and joined, and in 2015 we bought a little private system. So we cover about 100 square miles now and about 5,000 customers.
So you're, during the legislative season, you're having to go and advocate on behalf of water rights and things like that? Is that what's
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time up there the past like 3 years. We were trying to get the bill that created us modified slightly, and we got the original bill passed the first time. But when we went to get some little technical amendments to it, it took us 3 sessions to get it passed all the way.
Wow, that sounds
that's
really
how the legislature works or doesn't work.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So as far as how you teach, tell me what you love about it, and tell me what you feel like those trade-offs are with doing this donation. First of all, there's sort of 2 parts to how you're teaching that I want to talk about. One is donation only. So that means, from what I hear, is that you don't have a set price, that people pay what they choose to. Do you have a suggested donation, or do people kind of know the expectation?
What I put out there is that the space costs me $4 per person per class, up to a maximum of $20. And anything that's left in that basket after I pull out the cash to pay for the space stays in the basket and goes to JARDIN de los Niños. So some people, I try really hard not to pay attention to what people pay. Right. Sometimes somebody will be
sort of like a church collection basket where there's just money in there.
Right.
And it almost sounds like the way that you handle the money as well, that you kind of deliberately choose to almost not count it, where you just take that $20 out, or however many you need, pass it under, and then it's like there's just a big wad of cash that you're not really even, you're going to just take it down to there. And
my classes tend to be small, so it's usually a small wad of cash.
It's a small wad of cash.
Yeah, but it's usually stuffed in an envelope. It's not organized or sorted or anything. My deal with the ladies at the thrift shop is they count the money and I shop. So, when I get around to turning in a donation, it might be anywhere from $80 to $120. And that's over, weeks.
Right.
But the thing about it is, it's consistent. They have been who my classes benefit the whole time. They're on my Smile.Amazon account.
What made you choose them, and what do they do? And we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but I think you should put it out there so people know.
Well, I guess one of the things that was important to me was that they're local. And I like the fact that they do their best to give small children a good start in life. Children who are, living in a situation that's pretty uncertain. And I think they do terrific work. And
it's for children who are homeless or near homelessness.
Yes.
And it's like a preschool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they have a campus that in Las Cruces, they do a really kind of neat thing with their homeless services. They have a campus that's called Community of Hope. They have a homeless shelter. The city actually allowed them to have a tent city outside of the homeless shelter. And they've got other services located on the same campus. So they have St. Luke's Medical Clinic and JARDIN de los Niños. I'm not sure what else is there, but it's a nice concept.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a wonderful thing to support.
Yeah.
How do you think that you've been in these businesses that are making money? So how do you feel about why have you chosen to do it this way, and how do you feel about this this choice that you have made to do it that way? What is that? What has that done for you to be able to just do it as a gift?
Well, I look at teaching as just part of my practice. I like the community aspect of yoga. I have a yoga room here at my house, and my own practice here. But I like practicing with people. If I could pull off what Eric did and just do a, a total freedom to style class,
I'm
I'd
like,
be happy
how did
with
you
that.
have the guts to do that? He would have this class where people would just come and practice together and there was no instruction.
Right. Well, and that happens once in a while, depending on who shows up to my class. I mean, I guess I just view teaching as part of my practice. I have a day job, which I like and enjoy, and that's how I earn my living. I think that people should expect to pay for a yoga class, but it's not something I need to support myself. I think I like the idea of just sort of passing that along.
Do you feel like because you have made it donation, just a sliding donation, that you've been able to make it accessible? I know many teachers have told me that they're concerned about the fact that it sort of goes to it tends to be a wealthier demographic that can afford to do it. Do you feel
Right.
like you're able to serve a wider range of people?
Definitely. And I've gotten thank you notes in the donation basket and those, which is very sweet. And I appreciate that, but I sort of look at the way I do it as being a little selfish too, because I don't want to run a business. I don't want to keep track of receipts. I don't want to keep track of I just don't want to do that. So it works for me. And yes, I know that in some cases it allows people to attend yoga classes that wouldn't otherwise.
So you're able to focus just on the teaching. You're able to have, I was talking over you and you were saying that you're able to allow people to attend class who wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also able to do it as on a donation. We talked a little bit about how this is sort of a scalable idea. And I was thinking about this. I'm like, basically on a much bigger model, this is how Newman's Own operates.
Sure.
And there's a book that was written about Paul Newman and the Newman's Own Foundation and the work they do. And at 100% of their profits go to charity. They're an organization, yes, they do have people that they pay, just like you pay, for the space. But they, once they've paid their staff and, for all of their work that they do, then everything goes into charities. So there's somebody who's sort of working on the same model at a bigger scale. I also know of one coach that I worked with, a sales coach, who donates half of all of her profits to charity.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are ways to also do this at studios where you could have, most of your classes running for profit, and then have, I know of studios that do that have, one or two classes that they run on just a total donation basis, or it's a free, like sometimes meditation classes I see sometimes as a.
Right. I think, I don't know if you've heard of Darren Rhodes, but I think he's coming over sometime pretty soon to Las Cruces to do a donation I'm not sure, I think it's donation based, but a class that will benefit a charity at one of the local studios. And I think we have 3 studios in Las Cruces now. And I think that all 3 of them do some level of having a community class that benefits something.
That sounds so nice.
Yeah.
I've heard some other people have taught, I've seen conversations in like yoga teachers groups where people are saying that it's, become very commercial. So there's studios opening up on every corner in places that some people are living. And
Right.
like in my area, we have, within a 5-mile radius, we have several different studios. They all kind of serve different groups.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't feel like we're in the middle of, like a hotbed. But it is, when we were started, it was like you said, there was one place where you could go and get classes. Do you
Right.
feel like was there some reason that you felt that it really should just be something that you did out of service? Was that from something that you were taught or an idea that you had, or was it just more the fact that you just wanted to teach and you didn't really want to deal with turning it into a business?
It's kind of all of the above, I think. But really, I mean, bottom line for me is I don't have to deal with any of the business aspect of it, really. And I enjoy that a lot. Um, I think we all have a duty to, well, help each other where we can, and offer something to the world.
It's so lovely that you're able to just, like keep it as this sort of, I won't say, pure thing, but just that you have a love of it and you're able to just pass that on, and you're not feeling like you're having to figure out, how do I make this be something that supports me, or how do I sort of work on the business end. You've just found a way to kind of say, I always want to make the business end like completely irrelevant.
Right.
Now, do something out of love, take the money, give it to someone who really needs it.
Right. I don't I don't cast any aspersions that I really, want to support people who run studios and teach classes that they expect to make a living from. I would never want to do anything to undermine that in any way. And it's something I try to be cognizant of, as far as not just saying, well, it's free yoga, come on over. But I just, I already have a job.
Why not? Why do it on a donation? Like if you really wanted to just do it, totally, you could just basically not charge at all. So I'm curious why you feel that people need to pay for it, or is it just more like, okay, I need to at least cover the expenses? Like why?
Well, for one thing, I do need to pay for the space, and it comes back to not wanting to undermine what other people do. I don't want to put the vibe out there that, well, it's free. There are a lot of people doing yoga classes who need to earn something from it. On the other hand, I'm very happy that it provides an opportunity for people who find it financially difficult to go to classes somewhere else.
Well, and also I'm wondering too, if you don't make it more comfortable for people who may not feel at place at home in a fancy studio or a gym, and maybe it's just even like not everybody. Maybe people have the money, but it's not where they feel like they belong.
Right. I've attended 2 or 3, maybe 3 yoga classes in a couple of different gyms, and my hat's off to anybody who can teach under those circumstances. I'm just like,
I won't teach in a gym, and I know many teachers who have, and I know some very, very good teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We have a good gym, and there was a great teacher there, and I often would go there when I first moved here. But I'm like, because I teach a kind of openly spiritual class where I do meditation, I just always felt like it was, I would not teach in a gym, that it's just too much of a clash. And people who have taught in the gyms have told me that there is, they feel that expectation that it should be somewhat exercisey, Um,
Right.
and I just haven't, even though I do teach a fairly exercisey class, like I just wanted to not, I think it's similar to what you're saying. I didn't want to be constrained.
Well, yeah, and the gyms where I've been to yoga classes have just been noisy. I mean, it just really not a good space for yoga. I work out with a trainer at a gym in El Paso once a week, and sometimes go down there for cardio or whatever. But it's just a really, really noisy atmosphere. The one class I took there, I couldn't hear anything the instructor was saying. I was just sort of blindly following along. And then a few years ago, we had a Swami visiting from India, Swami Adhyatmananda. And I think he's part of the Shivananda school. Actually, I know a lady who went to India and studied with him a couple of years ago. And one of his students who'd studied with him in India sort of hosted him here and set him up to teach a couple of classes at this gym and then one out in the park. I wouldn't mind doing more outdoor yoga. It's kind of hot right now, but that would be fun.
Right. I like, and so, what I hear you say too is that you're sort of able to stay in control, and that you have, you want to create a certain type of atmosphere for yourself in teaching and for your students, and that by doing this, you're able to simply focus on the teaching.
Right.
And make an experience where people come, they know that it's kind of a safe, nurturing space. Anybody's welcome. Their money is going toward a good cause. And you're kind of, like you're doing it in such a way where you've minimized all the business aspects of it.
Right.
Yeah, which is lovely.
Well, the one thing I do is I ask people to sign a waiver form, which basically says you can't ever sue me for anything and don't take any words that come out of my mouth as medical advice ever. That, and that's kind of a bottom line safety issue. But
Do you carry insurance?
I do not. And
I think the Yoga Alliance says that there has never ever been a claim on yoga insurance by any of their members.
Well, you look at some of the discussions and what's been written about injuries in yoga classes, and it seems like there are more and more of them. Yoga classes have gotten kind of out of control in some ways, but people usually attribute that to doing something they should have said no to. And I started practicing yoga somewhere in the very early 90s after having been in pain for about a year. I mean, my back was a wreck when I started doing yoga. And I've injured myself in class a few times. And it's always been doing something I knew I shouldn't have done, So I don't know. People, I think Eric mentioned one time that somebody actually died in one of his classes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Some guy died, just dropped dead.
Wow.
Right there. Yeah. And I think there may have been a lawsuit here or there, but I think that kind of thing happens a little more around inappropriate behavior than around injury.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I do think there are a lot of people doing some fairly acrobatic stuff these days, and I see some things on videos that people post up, and I think like that is not safe.
Right.
It's sort of, some people are doing some pretty extreme things, but then I used to do some pretty extreme things, so I guess you just don't know whether people know how to keep themselves safe or not just by watching a video. Mm-hmm. I'm curious too if you had ever, this is what it's evolved to. Have you tried other ways of doing this in the past? is there anything that you've sort of modified about how you deal with, like, was there ever a time where you didn't do a donation, or where you handled your setup differently? Or
Not really. I mean, it's either been teaching at a studio just to support the studio and get free yoga classes, or just the way I'm doing it now. I mean, I just decided early on that, well, I guess part of what plays into it is the concept of dana, which is a Buddhist concept of generosity. That the people should just put in the basket what they felt they should put in there.
Dana, D-O-N-A?
D-A-N-A.
D-A-N-A. I'm not familiar with that. Can you talk a little bit about dana?
Not really qualified to do that, but it is
just from your own understanding of it, because it sounds like it's something that you have taken to heart.
It's a very important concept in Buddhism. I mean, if you think about the monks that go around with their begging bowls, and people in some Buddhist countries feed them that way, or even here, I'm aware of a temple in El Paso where, on Sundays everybody brings food and feeds the monks. It's important to be generous without worrying too much about, does this give me social standing, or what am I trying to get something in exchange, or I don't know, just dealing with your own stuff around making a donation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a lot of ego that can go into, giving to charity.
Right.
And, so that idea of doing it without expectation of this is challenging.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sort of exploring your own kind of motives and expectations. I mean, it's one of the reasons I prefer to just really not spend too much time with the dana basket, with the donation basket in yoga class. Just take out what goes to the studio and leave it at that. It's not about me, and it's not mine. So.
Yeah, and even the way you handle your money is actually a reflection. And, I want to talk, that sort of brings up a point, which is that I have seen teachers who handle money different ways. And it's interesting because a lot of times in yoga studios or just yoga teachers, sometimes they don't handle money the way, say, like Starbucks does.
Right.
And it's sort of like, there's this whole expectation with money. There's a thing that happens in the exchange. And sometimes people don't think about what is the message that I give with how I receive money and how I give change back. Like if you start pulling it out of your purse, is that sort of how you normally would handle money from a business, Right. And it seems like what you've done is you've created this very nice exchange where people are able to come in. There's a basket. There's a sense of giving because it just goes in the basket.
Right. And I try to have the basket sort of across the room from the doorway. There's nobody monitoring it or paying any attention to it. It's just there.
Sort of like just a donation box at a church or something. And then
we don't pass it around.
And then you're not like, oh goody, we got $50 this week. It's just
right.
There's some more money, throw it in the pile.
Right. Well, when I get around to going by the thrift store and making the donation to JARDIN, I will sometimes mention in class that, well, I made the donation this week and we generated this much for them, but that's, that's nothing to do with any particular set time period or
It's
any.
just so that they know that you did make the donation and that it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's lovely. I love what you've set up, it's just nice to hear all it's thoughtful, but it's also easy.
Yeah, it's, I suppose it's, if in some sense, people kind of have to think about it when they come to my class to have cash. A lot of times now when you are going to a yoga class, you can just get online and reserve your spot and pay for it with a credit card without ever really interacting with anybody. And I may or may not have change, and you just kind of have to dig in the basket to see if there's any change there.
Yeah, it's sort of like when I go to my hairdresser, they take all their tips in cash, and it's something I have to think about. And
Right.
A lot of other places I don't have to think about that, but it doesn't mean I still go to my hairdresser. And
You were talking about the nail plates on I guess with Robert Gardner.
Well, we really got off topic.
Yeah, and I was trying to make sure I have cash for the nail ladies, or men. There are actually 3 or 4 young men that do nails at the place I go to.
Yeah, we have some men that do them.
Yeah. Oh. Well, so Suzanne, are you teaching any classes still right now?
Right now, I'm not. I've been putting together. It's interesting that I've been doing all this yoga stuff and not really teaching. And that was because I completed my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, to build a class, you really have to be consistent. And I just found, I just couldn't, it got to be this real difficult extra thing to commit to. I had so many commitments with school. And
Right.
now that I'm moving, then it's like, this is just not the time.
Right.
After this summer, my hope is to find a situation. But for me personally, one of the things that I've come to know and learn about myself is that I always was kind of a teacher's teacher. And because I come out of a teaching family, literally everyone in my family is a teacher. Like everyone in my family is a teacher. So I guess it just sort of naturally seemed like that was where I went. I have always wanted to teach workshops. I've always wanted to do teacher training. I can't realize I could just give myself permission to be the teacher I always wanted to be. And that's what I'm creating. So when I teach, I'll probably do something kind of similar to what you're doing, which is that I will have a class or 2 that I'll do locally, primarily in order to have the experience of teaching. And it probably will be something very similar where it'll just be, I've kind of realized, like, local teaching classes, that's really, you're never going to really get rich off of that. And the goal for me with that is just like you, just to teach. I love to teach, and the experience of teaching a regular class is something that I want to have, but I don't necessarily see that as my business, other than just to give me the skill of being in front of teachers. I really learned that everybody kind of has a path. I've talked with many different people in the process of developing sadhana. There are people who want to work one-on-one. There with people. There are people who really want to do corporate yoga. I talked with one woman, like, that's her thing. She wants to do corporate yoga. I've kind of realized, like, people need to know that it's okay to, like, be on your own path and be the person you want to be. I really like teaching. If I want to set up my space, I told you before that I want to have my own house, and one of the things I want to do is have a yurt there with where people come out and I can teach a workshop, or I can just have a regular class there, and as many as I want.
Yes.
And just have control over my space, because I love that idea. I just love the idea of having a space that's mine, and that I can I can keep it totally low key, and like a real sad song.
Yeah.
You know, I have no desire to have like a real super studio per se. I just
Right.
want to be able to teach basically to my heart's content.
Right.
And then, you know, as far as making money and all that, I feel like doing professional, one of the things I came to realize is like with things like teacher training, stuff like that, people really need to, in order for me to devote the time and people to devote their own time, there needs to be like a fair amount of money on that. And it's not about those things need to be, it's just that people need to value it. And I started realizing that it's part of the way that people express how important it is to them to have it. And I tried to run away from that. I wanted it all to be more affordable, or my natural inclination was to do less. And I started realizing that people need to pay a certain amount of money in order to value that kind of training and to make the commitment to it.
Yeah.
And then I'd be shooting myself in the foot by offering it too cheap. So yeah, I'm developing courses, and I'm very thoughtful about the value of those things. Some of them will be online and online only, and then some of them will be more like this, where there's a video conference and we're meeting, and there's a group of people that are meeting on a regular basis. So
Right.
I don't know if that answers the question very clearly. But I think local teaching, there are teachers who make a living at it, but it just wasn't, I came to a realization that that was always just sort of for my own joy.
Right.
You know, and all of it really is, all of it is for my joy. But as far as the local teaching, I think it's just a matter, I love what you're doing. I love that idea of doing something like that, where it's just something where it seems like it creates a community experience where you're all doing it out of, as a whole, that, you know, that you're all donating to the same place.
Right.
With your gift as a community, that there's a community aspect to how you do that donation.
I like keeping it consistent. I know some places, you know, it's kind of a different charity every time, which is fine. That's just, I prefer the consistency of kind of picking one local one and going with that. And you know, I think what JARDIN de los Ninos does is such a wonderful program.
It's an expression of what you can do with a consistent practice over time.
Right.
Your maybe donation per class might just be $20-$30 or whatever, but then over time you have made an impact to the
right. Right. Well, and it's you know, it's consistent over years, so it may not be a huge dollar amount in the donation world to this, you know, great nonprofit, but it's been consistent over a long period of time.
And so. Your class, you're teaching your class that this value of a constant effort. You know, like I think that there's something that you're teaching in the way that you're doing your donations, and that you've thought about creating a sort of constant environment, a steadiness to the practice.
Yeah, you know, that quote from Patabi Joyce that everyone uses, do your practice and all is coming, is you don't even know what's coming. Just do your practice. You know, these little surprise gifts just keep appearing.
Well, you have been a wonderful gift. I'm so glad that we had the time together, and I love hearing about what you've done. There's just a sweet quality to it that I love, thoughtful and kind and calm, and suits you.
Oh.
How you are. And I'm one of these days I'll come out to Las Cruces and
I have a guest room, and please come.
oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll take
seriously.
you on that one.
You know, I met Sandy Jones up in the Santa Fe Taos area, and
Oh, really?
yeah, she was out there on a photography tour, and so I drove up, and we wandered around Taos for a while, and went to Ojo Caliente.
Nice.
It was sweet. So, you know, New Mexico's a great place to vacation. Come visit.
Oh, thank you so much. I would love to do that. Okay.
It would be fun.
Cool.
Well, you know, another Susan has been here. Susan Dotrey, Susan Gantz.
Oh, yeah, she came and visited me too.
Yeah, she was on a road trip,
Awesome.
stopped through.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me wind up. Let's close the recording out, and
Okay.
you can stay on. Hang on. We'll just thank you, everybody, for attending. We're going to have the link below for the I cannot pronounce it. If you would like to make a donation as well, we would really appreciate that. And also we'll have links below for Sadhana in the YouTube video. Thank you so much for attending. Bye.
Bye.